Chemical imbalance is an inaccurate term to describe something intricate. Have you ever been to the doctor and, well, psychiatrist or, you know, your family doctor, and he says you have a chemical imbalance? Well, what does that exactly mean? To tell you the truth, chemical imbalance is a term derived by drug companies and promoted through the media to get people's attention. Do you really have a chemical imbalance? It's a lot more complicated than that, okay? Chemical imbalance is a cheap way of saying you have a problem and we don't know exactly how to deal with it. That's the truth, and we're going to talk about that. The theory argues that neurotransmitters imbalances with the brain are the main causes of psychiatric conditions, and these conditions can be improved with medication which corrects these imbalances. The phrase originated from the scientific study of brain chemistry. In the 1950s, the monoamine oxidase inhibitors, MAOIs, and tricyclic antidepressants were accidentally discovered to be effective in the treatment of clinical depression. These findings and other supported evidence led by Joseph J. S. to publish the paper called Ketamine Hypothesis of Affective Disorders in 1965. He associated low levels of neurotransmitters with depression. Okay, so what they basically say is there are three main neurotransmitters that they go after, and that's serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. Now, they believe depression is associated a lot with serotonin. Dopamine we'll get to in a second, but depression has been associated a lot with serotonin, a little bit with norepinephrine, but it's mainly a serotonin thing. And anxiety medications work in the same manner. If you've ever heard of Paxil, you will know that it is great for anxiety. It functions as an antidepressant, but it works with anxiety. So when we talk about depression and drugs to treat depression, we also assume that we're talking about drugs that reduce anxiety because they all work on the same neurotransmitters: serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine. Monoamine hypothesis. Okay, they believe that, well, serotonin is the main contributor in this whole game. That the monoamine drugs, it reacts in the brain. Monoamine hypothesis in the brain, the monoamine area contains serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. Okay, so they hypothesized that the MAOIs inhibitors, which are rarely used today because of so many side effects, contributed to changing the neurotransmitters in a positive way. How it exactly functions, they're not sure, but this hypothesis went on for 25 years. It began in the 1960s, I believe, and it's still popular today. Dopamine hypothesis. Now, schizophrenia, they find that drugs that reduce dopamine help with psychotic symptoms. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but there are SSRIs, there are atypical antidepressants that function on the dopamine receptors. And when you add dopamine, it shows more psychotic symptoms. This was proven accurate by amphetamines, and because they react by increasing dopamine, and they exacerbate the symptoms of psychotic areas. So they believe that dopamine has some ability and some functionality in reducing psychotic symptoms. Now, this term is somewhat questionable because newer antipsychotics focus less on blocking the dopamine and more on dopamine and serotonin. So it's a little bit of a puzzle. According to critics, the chemical imbalance hypothesis has been overpromoted and continues to be advanced and factual by pharmaceutical companies. They believe the general population and many journalists have accepted the hypothesis into the understanding of mental illness uncritically. Some academics believe that the advertisements are oversimplified and don't fully explain what is happening. It doesn't explain what is happening. There is so much going on. And right now, I'm only briefing you on a big overlay of the picture. I'm trying to show you that when your doctor says you have a chemical imbalance, you ask, what the hell does that mean? Because the truth is, it's so complicated, and you need a better explanation than just the fact that, you know, you have a chemical imbalance. That is a cheap way of getting out of a jam and prescribing medicines that react on the neurotransmitters. Pharmaceutical companies were allowed to they were eventually allowed to advertise, and as they began to advertise, they pulled up the theory and they began to promote it because it sounds good. Chemical imbalance. Well, I have a chemical imbalance. That's why I'm having problems. The pharmaceutical companies are very tricky, you know. For example, I'll give you an example. Malox has an A and a U in it. Quaaludes has an A and a U in it. Believe it or not, that those two names were actually picked on purpose with a lot of thought into them. The UA was thought to be symbolic of a symbolic term, and they thought it would catch on. So these pharmaceutical companies are very smart, very bright. They go after the population in general, and they want to, you know, make money. I mean, that's what their goal is, and they're going to make it however they can, to the point where they actually, you know, they actually promote things that may not be accurate. And they go to such great extensive efforts just to find out names and what works with the population, what's catchy. Malox was catchy. Quaaludes was catchy. The A and the U. Why? I know there was a lot of thought behind it, but it's just pharmaceutical companies are tricky. Drug reps, I don't know if you've ever seen them come into the doctor's office. Believe it or not, NPR reports that drug reps are mainly recruited from cheerleading squads in college. The majority of drug reps are very attractive. Now, that is not an error on the pharmaceutical companies. They are purposely trying to sell drugs with sex because sex sells. And believe it or not, this is not new information. You can look it up anywhere. It may take some time to get the information, but pharmaceutical companies send these beautiful people out to doctors' offices, and whether the doctor admits it or not, they seem to have an effect on them. Drug reps are paid a good deal of money, and I've seen them actually go into offices with lunches. I haven't seen them, but I know that they go in with lunches. They buy, they spend. I think the last estimate was about $15,000 per doctor, because they prescribe all these new drugs because they're told how wonderful they are. A chemical imbalance is sometimes thought to be a cause of mental illness. The term is used to consumer literature and websites for psychoactive drugs, and it is advertised in the United States after the deregulation of pharmaceutical advertising. It is not used in scientific literature as it does not reflect current knowledge. Okay, so I basically already got that stated. So, you know, pharmaceutical advertising, I think that's a little sketchy, because the pharmaceutical advertising, they don't play by the game. They go straight for you, and they fight hard. That's not a new thing. They've done that for some time. And I mean, for example, I saw a commercial about shingles. Well, shingles is not nearly as bad as they made it out to be. It is not clear to what extent neural changes might cause mental illness, and what extent illnesses might cause neural changes. In addition to depression, changes in levels of neurotransmitters have also been implicated in anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder, manic depressive disorder, schizophrenia, and Parkinson's disease, as well as changes and norepinephrine dopamine systems have also been considered. So all of this is I'm doing a very big overlay, and I want to get it straight that, you know what, it's not what it seems. Thank you very much. Good day, good night, good mental health.